The structure and function of the heart. Mammals have a 4-chambered heart. The right 2 chambers deal with deoxygenated blood, while the left 2 chambers deal with oxygenated blood. This ensures that deoxygenated and oxygenated blood does not mix. A powerful muscular heart pumps blood into the arteries. The arteries divide into much smaller vessels called arterioles, which in turn divide into even much smaller vesicles called capillaries. Capillaries spread out in a network fashion in the tissues. The capillaries eventually reunite to form venules that in turn form larger vessels called veins. The veins take blood back to the heart. External structure of the heart. The heart is a muscular organ located in the chest cavity in between the lungs. It pumps the blood to the whole body. A translucent membrane called pericardium encloses the heart. The pericardial membrane secretes a fluid that lubricates the heart as it is working. The outer part of the membrane is covered with a layer of fat that acts as a shock absorber. This membrane also helps to keep the heart in position and checks on overstretching of the heart. The heart is made up of special type of muscle called cardiac muscle that contains interconnected muscle fibers. These muscle fibers are supplied with blood through coronary artery. The coronary artery branches from the aorta just beyond the semilunar valves. It forms branches, which run on the heart surface and into the heart muscle before dividing into capillaries. The capillaries join up to form the coronary vein, which conveys blood to the right atrium. Internal structure of the heart. The mammalian heart is composed of 4 chambers, 2 atria and 2 ventricles. The atria form the upper chamber while the ventricles form the lower chambers. Atria are thin-walled and smaller in volume than the ventricles. The right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the body organs except the lungs. The left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs. The ventricles are composed of thick cardiac muscles. The wall of the left ventricle is thicker than the wall of the right ventricle. The volume of the left ventricle is smaller than that of the right ventricle. A thick muscular wall called the septum separates the left half of the heart from the right half. This prevents the mixing of deoxygenated and oxygenated blood. The thicker wall of the left ventricle enables it to generate the high pressure required to take blood to distant body tissues. The right ventricle pumps blood for a short distance to the lungs, hence the thin wall. Between the atria and the ventricle are atrioventricular valves, also called cuspid valves, that prevent the blood from flowing back into the atria when ventricles contract. On the right is the tricuspid valve and on the left is the bicuspid valve. These valves are supported by tendons, which are attached to the wall of the ventricle on each side of the heart. The tendons prevent the atrioventricular valves from turning inside out when under pressure when ventricles contract. At the base of the pulmonary artery and the aorta are cup-like valves called semilunar valves. These valves are opened by the force of the blood generated by contraction of the ventricles. The valves prevent backflow of blood into the ventricles when the ventricles relax. Circulation in the heart. Deoxygenated blood from the body tissues except the lungs enters the right atria from vena cava then to right ventricle via the tricuspid valve. When the right ventricle contracts, the blood from the right ventricle is forced via semilunar valves through the pulmonary artery into the lungs. Oxygenated blood from the lungs flow through the pulmonary vein to the left atrium via the bicuspid valve to the left ventricle. Blood from the left ventricle is forced to flow via the semilunar valve through the aorta to body tissues. Pumping mechanism of the heart. For every heartbeat, the heart goes through rhythmic contraction, systole, and relaxation, diastole, of the heart muscle. These events are referred to as the cardiac cycle. At the beginning of every cardiac cycle, there is a brief cardiac diastole when both the atria and the ventricles are relaxed and filling with blood. During the diastole, atrioventricular valves are open. Diastole is then followed by atrial systole, a period when the atria contract, pumping blood through the open atrioventricular valves into the ventricles. The ventricles are still relaxed. On filling with blood, the ventricles get into systole. Ventricular systole is when the ventricle wall contracts. Ventricle wall contracts. It generates pressure which causes the atrioventricular valves to close, producing the first heart sound known as a lub sound. The high pressure also causes the semilunar valves to open. The contracting ventricle walls pumps blood out of the heart through the wall-open semilunar valves into the pulmonary artery and the aorta. At the end of ventricular systole, pressure in the ventricles drops below that of the aorta and the pulmonary artery. To prevent backflow of the blood into the ventricles from the arteries, the semilunar valves close, producing the second heart sound, the dub sound. This marks the end of a cardiac cycle, when the whole heart gets into a brief cardiac diastole and the cycle starts all over again. Blood pumped out of the heart into the aorta and onto other arteries flows in form of contraction waves known as pulses. Pulses are due to dilation of arteries. The rhythmic dilation enables arteries to accommodate blood that is at higher pressure. The pulse corresponds to the heartbeat and can be felt when large arteries near the skin are pressed near a bone. For example, at the wrist. Heartbeat. The heart is capable of contracting and relaxing rhythmically without fatigue due to its special muscle called cardiac muscle. The cardiac muscle fibers are interconnected, so that waves of contraction can travel throughout the mass of the muscle. The rhythmic contraction of the heart arises from within the heart muscles without nervous stimulation. The heart muscles are therefore said to be myogenic. However, the heartbeat is initiated by the pacemaker or sinoatrial node. This is a small area of specialized cardiac muscle fibers in the wall of right atrium located near the vena cava. The sinoatrial node sends out a wave of excitation to the atria. These waves of excitation travel towards the septum and into the atrioventricular node, and are discharged down the Purkinje tissue down to the bottom of the heart and then distributed to the ventricles. This causes the ventricles to contract, ventricular systole. Although the beating of the heart is initiated by the sinoatrial node, the rate is under nervous control. The vagus nerve slows down the heartbeat, whereas the sympathetic nerve speeds up the heartbeat. In human beings, the normal heartbeat rate is 72 beats per minute, but can vary depending on factors such as activity, age, and health. The heartbeat is monitored using an instrument known as the stethoscope. Thank you for watching this biology lesson. Please subscribe to this channel and other Genius channels relevant to your level of study.